G'day, welcome back. In today's episode, Islamophobia versus Islamopragmatism. We take a look at why pragmatism is the best policy. Bega turns circular resourcing into a new form of governance, and we take a look as to why Australia has stagnated. In 2 words, offensive questions. All that and more on the Mark Perrotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Perrotta Show.
Let's take a quick look at some of the news that's come out over the last couple of days. A major review has been demanded after a spike in 000 outages. Australia has recorded 35 major emergency call outages in 2025 and more than 1,700 localised failures. Politicians from both sides are now calling for full independent reviews of the National Emergency Telecommunications System, highlighting systemic risks similar to the pre-NDIS overhaul debate. The centralised national systems are failing vulnerable people. WA has introduced one of the toughest recreational and commercial fishing bans in Australian history. A 21-month ban on demersal fishing, that's dewfish, snapper, etc., from the Kalbarri Augusta, including Perth waters, and commercial closures have been announced in multiple zones. Big government is now intervening into community and commercial activities. Fishing groups are outraged over the loss of income plus local tourism declines, and environmentalists say it's overdue and will save collapsing fish stocks. Now, I don't have a problem with this one, if I'm being super duper honest. Like, I believe in a capitalist system, but capitalism can sometimes turn into a lack of empathy and a lack of forward thinking. Just make the dollar today and don't think about the dollar tomorrow. And so sometimes government does have to step in and regulate where businesses tend to overreach, specifically when it comes to the environment, because there are situations where the environment cannot catch up, specifically when it comes to animal species. We've seen that continuously, especially throughout Australia's history when it comes to extinction, etc., due to human interference. Banking regulation shake-up. The ANZ boss has taken control of the ABA Council. ANZ Group CEO Nuno Matos just became the chair of the ABA, signalling a shift in how banks will coordinate compliance, anti-scam regulation, competition policy, and customer protections. Now, the ABA effectively sets all the rules for banks to follow, so this is a major update and a major change. So up until now, I believe for the last 3 or 4 years, this chair or head chair has been run by the head of NAB or the CEO of NAB. So this will be a major shift into the way that banking works and even just the direction. The call is to effectively recreate branches across Australia and create more community-funded or community-run banking, decentralized banking away from, the big banks, and allow for the smaller banks to do the community outreach work where the big banks focus in on big programs and big projects, which is something that I really like. Trickle-down economics is something that I truly believe in, but the way that the banking system works now is that it's basically just a 2-tier system instead of a multi-tiered system where there's the big banks and then there's the very, very small banks, and there's not much in between that allows for competition to excel. New aged care staffing and training rules come into force. Several aged care facilities are reporting internal restructures due to stricter 24/7 nursing requirements and quality metrics. This mirrors the NDIS debate, where workforce shortages and with algorithmic reporting tools have been announced. Leading into that, we can take a quick look into beyond the NDIS changes. Organizations are reporting DHS, Immigration, and Centrelink increasingly using automated decision frameworks. Concerns have been raised about ICANN, which is effectively the new AI or machine learning method for ensuring that NDIS payments are going to the right people and when. Concerns have been raised about ICANN opacity. Appeal rights have been removed, and there is a large risk of wrongful denials. Now, tightening up rules around the NDIS makes sense. However, I'm not sure if the government has learned its lesson yet from the robo-debt issues. Just train good people. That's a pretty simple one. When it comes to matters of money and human issues, you can't put everyone into a box. Yes, you can do a decent job of getting about 80% correct, but that final 20%, that becomes a problem. Now, we've come a long way in machine learning since robo-debt and the issues that came out of that. However, what we can say for certain is that AI is not perfect. I use AI daily, multiple times a day, and it hallucinates constantly. I will ask it for information where I want to get that final 10-15% of data just so that I can pull through accurate information. And it will spit out numbers and facts sometimes that are wrong. And I know they're wrong because I know what the actual information is. And so it hallucinates far too much and it fills in data, especially when you try and get specific with things. It'll fill in data just to say it's given you an answer. It very rarely likes to say, I don't know, or I can't find information on this, except for when it comes to controversial issues. It will say, I can't really speak about that because if I speak about that, then I might risk insulting someone. And there are ways around it, but it won't just answer direct questions specifically about Islam. That's the one thing I've really noticed. It really dislikes answering questions about Islam. And so I think that this is going to go very, very poorly, this ICANN product. I think it's going to end up causing more grief than it does any good. Severe cost of living plus energy policy reviews are underway. Treasury and industry groups are laying groundwork for the 2026 Energy Price Relief Program to recalibrate renewable subsidy schemes. This is a signal that potential future reforms in the energy credits, storage mandates, and grid priorities are underway. This is necessary. We need this. This is actually overdue in a big, big way. Australia is simultaneously trying to increase its ability to fund data center programs while at the same time reducing our capacity for producing energy in this nation. I'm not sure if these people have ever heard the saying, you cannot have your cake and eat it too, but that's what they're trying to do here. This comes amidst news that the economy in Australia has effectively stagnated, and our potential for growth, even more terrifyingly, has also stagnated. When we're in an era of dire economic straits, and we're going to manage that by rebating people on their electricity without actually uplifting the power demand or the power supply to meet the power demand, we are now in managed decline. Stagnation does not exist in an economy. You can't be zero. You're either slowly rising or you're slowly falling, and Australia has now been slowly falling for effectively the last 10 years. And this isn't really just a Labor-Liberal issue. And as we've spoken before, the Liberals haven't been conservatives for a long time, effectively since they got rid of Tony Abbott. The second they got rid of Tony Abbott, Liberals made up their minds. They said, we're going left-wing, we're just going to shift over and try and take Labor votes. But they can't because they're still classing themselves as an opposition to an extreme left-wing party. And Labor masks itself as moderate enough that they don't necessarily fall under that cap in the same way that the Greens do. And the Greens get to act as the radical shield for Labor's policies, but they're effectively aligned on 95% of the things they want to get done. And the Liberals have now tacked on to about 80% of that as well. Major failures and major overhauls of the aged care industry have also been announced. Now, today in the Senate, there was the Committee for Community Affairs legislation, which was running effectively all day. And we got to see one of the greatest reasons why we are so stagnant in this country. There is a very specific group of people who are causing this to happen. And it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with bad policy, as much as it has to do with stagnant conversation. We've already spoken about Maureen Faruqi. We've already mentioned Senator Payman, and now we've got a new person to add to the list. This senator came out and effectively displayed why this country is in such dire straits. When a Senate committee is asking questions, it is your obligation to answer. If there is a question that seems problematic to you, then you're probably the problem. Now, what the Senate is that people don't really understand, they think it's a parliamentary body. But what the Senate actually is effectively court. The people who come in are classed as witnesses. You are giving evidence. You have to take evidence on notice. As you take that evidence on notice, you then have to come back to provide more of that evidence, and you are held to account as a consequence of what you say. There is no ability to be innocent until proven guilty because it is not technically a court of law, but it is a legal court. The people who are on the committees are chairing to ensure that the people who are tasked with our tax dollars are achieving the things that they said that they would with that money. And so when any person comes out and pretends as if they get to say, "How dare you ask that question?" you've lost us straight away. And you've failed this nation as a consequence. Because if there is a difficult question that you cannot answer, take it on notice. So I'll take that on notice, and when you take it on notice, you come back with evidence later to back up your own claim. But just to say it's offensive and have a dummy spit because someone asked a question you don't like is the reason that we are stagnating in this nation. Because radical questions require response, not claims of racism and insult and my feelings got hurt. If you are the kind of person that can have their feelings hurt, you have no place in the Senate. No place. And this question wasn't even outrageous. It was basically like, why have you guys failed? Why are you failing communities? A senator asking a question specifically about South Australia, where she is from, is told that it's kind of insulting. Let's take a look at the clip.
Senator Ruston.
Thanks. Just one final question in relation to the bed block issue, and that is the South Australian government, I understand, opened tenders for new services to take 120 long-stay hospital patients with nowhere to go due to lack of aged care availability. So essentially creating a halfway house for these patients. So I'm just interested, does the Minister consider temporary accommodation of this nature to be appropriate care setting for older Australians waiting for care placement?
I'll pass to Ms Garrett first.
No, I asked the Minister.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Senator Ruston, can I just say to the committee that the care of our elders across Australia does really matter to this government. We followed through. No, hear me out. We followed through with the Royal Commission and the issue of neglect for elders across Australia. And we will do everything we can across all portfolios, including mine, in terms of the Aboriginal hostels, to ensure that there are choices for our elders across Australia, be they First Nations people, be they from called communities, be they from city areas or regional and remote. So I really find it quite offensive, your line of questioning, as though we have no interest. You saw through the debate of the aged care bill, in which the Minister has created and enabled the opportunity for more access for elders to have choice. So I reject categorically any sort of assumption by you that there is no care in regards to looking at all different options for our elders.
So effectively what happened there, it's twofold. They go on and have a fun scuffle and the chair effectively has to pull their heads back in. But what we hear there is one deflection. The Liberal government was there when the Royal Commission happened into effectively the neglect of aged care. You've been in power for 4 years now. I think the entire Australian population is sick and tired of hearing, it's because they did such a bad job. We've just watched Donald Trump walk into what was one of the worst presidencies in human history, specifically on foreign affairs and on immigration, and do more in 4 months than any of you have done in 4 years. That excuse does not hold anymore. You then go on to say that it's offensive. Why is it offensive? The Labor government's solutions to date have all been band-aids. They have not done one thing to actually help people properly. Now, there were several committees all happening today. Another one that came out is that there's $139 odd million that has been allocated specifically to Indigenous Affairs. And that's one of the things that I really find interesting about a lot of these committees. Every single one of the committees has a portion specifically for Indigenous Affairs, and the dollar figures that you see in them are insane. The amount of money that is spent on Indigenous Affairs is insane. And the major issue that I'm seeing is that none of the solutions that are going into place are solutions. They're band-aids. Now, that might be a consequence of community reach out, right? Or community outreach, speaking to the people who are on these Indigenous boards, and the Indigenous boards are basically saying, well, we don't want you involved in our communities, but we want your money to fix our communities, but we're not actually going to fix it. We're just going to make the walls a little bit nicer and put some new furniture in. But, the taps are still going to leak and there are still going to be problems. $139 million specifically for rural and extremely rural locations within Australia for hospital care and for aged care. That's a really interesting one because Senator Ruston comes out and says 120 aged care facilities. And then the minister comes out and says it's actually 120 Indigenous halfway houses and housing for elders. And so from what I can tell, it seems like these 120 houses are only for Indigenous elders, not specifically for the population of South Australia or for the majority of South Australians. This is a spate of issues that we're seeing. I mean, Senator Hancock came out today and absolutely lambasted another senator who he'd been taken on notice effectively. So the way that these things work is that you don't come in once and that's it. You come in sort of like once every 2 or 3 weeks for a chat and you've got to answer questions. And especially if you've had questions come out on notice, which means I don't have the answer for you right now on this question. Next time I'm here, I'll bring an answer for that question. I don't want to give you false information. I want to give you accurate information on that question. But what most people do now is that they effectively take this as a way to ride the Senate and say, oh, maybe he'll forget about it. So we'll take it on notice if we don't want to answer it. And then we'll never come back to it if there are people who really aren't on their game. Not a Pocock. He is not one of those people. He is very switched on. And he's a good testament to how you can still have brain cells to having a football career. This guy was like the Australian captain or something. Like he wasn't some small-time footy player. Like he was a high-up footy player. And now David Pocock, you can look him up, he had a stellar career. And now he's an Australian senator. He's an independent from what I know. And the parts of his brain cells that did get knocked out were his logic and reasoning around green energy, because he's a big green energy bloke. He loves the wind and solar. But let's take a listen to this and him absolutely grilling this fine gentleman on the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee.
So why didn't you answer that on notice then?
I'd have to take that on notice, Senator.
Okay, so you're taking on notice why you didn't answer a question on notice. And at the last Senate estimates I asked, have any other concerns been raised? And you all looked at me and said, no, we'll take that on notice. You were sitting there knowing that you had potentially 80 to 100 staff that Senator Cadell has been asking about. And yet you come here and think that you can just fob the Senate off. Well, to me, that kind of highlights cultural issues at NEMA and why we're having so many staff reach out to us saying that this place is a bin fire. We're not valued. Can you explain yourselves?
So, Senator, we're not fobbing the Senate off.
Well, that's what it feels like when you're sitting there and you know the answer to a question and you don't answer it, which you're required to do under the standing orders, and you take it on notice, and then you don't even answer it on notice. And then when I say, why didn't you answer on notice, you say, I'll take it on notice. Like that surely is fobbing the Senate off.
Senator, as
So the Senate does some really good stuff, right? These committees are really impressive. I do think now NBC has started doing this. Sky News has started doing it to an extent as well, but I think that they need to start live streaming these on platforms that people actually use. They've got like no viewers. And these things are interesting. Like people would sit down and watch them. They're just on the wrong platforms. Like YouTube is good and well for the average man to go in and listen to. But TikTok is where you get the majority of people on lives. Even Discord. Throw it on Discord. Make it like a game of some sort. People can actually interact with it. They post comments while you're running through, and you can do it sort of like just a presentation style live stream, and people can interact with it. And so I think that there's opportunity for people to get more involved, and that's something that I think that would be good. It should be on every streaming platform that is available. This is the Australian Parliament, the Australian Senate, having conversations with the people who matter in this country daily. These things happen almost every day, at least while Parliament is in sit, right, while they're sitting. And so there needs to be more transparency on this. And obviously it's there, but people don't know about it and they wouldn't go looking for it. There are some really interesting things that get spoken about. And you get to see the absolute worst of our politicians as well. I mean, I think one of the worst people on the Australian Senate, without a doubt, has to be Senator Payman. So Senator Payman was technically placed into her role as a Labor senator, but then defected and went and sat, I don't know if it's as an independent or with the Greens. She seems like a Greens senator with the way that she speaks. But this clip, we'll watch this clip as well because it's just a hectic clip. And keep your eyes out in the background for what Senator Babbitt, if you are watching this, to what Senator Babbitt is doing in the meantime while Senator Payman is speaking.
Are obstructing justice, that this should be referred to a committee to be investigated if she is eligible to stand this place.
All that Senator Hanson does in this place is spread hatred, spread division, because that's what you're made to do here. And it's outrageous. It's beyond comprehension. Senator Hanson's quote, "I challenge anyone to tell me one thing that I've said that is racist." And here I begin. She has said, "I believe we're in danger of being swamped by Asians," in her first speech. In another statement, she says, "We're bringing in people from South Africa at the moment. There's a huge amount coming into Australia who have disease. They've got AIDS. If that is not racist, what is it?" The fact that you would say just weeks ago to Senator Faruqi, "Piss off back to Pakistan," you're not just vindictive, mean, nasty. You bring disgrace to the human race.
Senator Babbitt in the background. Oh, you bring disgrace to the human race. Senator Payman, I don't know. I haven't looked into how she managed to do this, but Senator Payman got in with less than 1% of the vote. I do not understand how that works. How did she end up in the position that she's in? She posted a video today with this 6-7 thing. And my kids are doing this, and it's a pain in the butt. They're ruining stuff. They're doing cultural appropriation. My daughter the other day came in and she starts going, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive. 6, 7. I'm like, no, mate. There is a proper tune to that. You don't get to write over years of culture and Wiggles tunes with your brain rot silliness. I've tried to ban it in the house, but it's not working. And this is a senator who's jumping onto this and doing the same thing. I haven't got the clip for you guys, but you can go find it. She's on YouTube. She's everywhere, basically, which is really irritating. And the scary part about it is senators stay in for 6 years. It's not like our normal parliament where it's every 3 years you can get a new government if your government's rubbish. Senators work on a 50% every 6 years scale, which means that every 6 years, if there's been a really bad government, right, 50% of them will leave, okay, or will potentially have the opportunity to be voted out. So she's got at least another 3 or 4 years under her belt to be able to continue being one of the least intelligent human beings on Earth within this space. That news segment went forever, but I'm classing that also as offensive questions. That's where we stagnate in this country. That's where we stagnate. Offensive questions being touted as something that is actually a real thing is problematic. Okay, you need hard questions and you need to be able to answer them. Because if you can't, then you either aren't a critical thinker or you can't separate your emotion from the actual facts of what is being asked of you. And as an Australian people, we deserve better. We definitely deserve better than these people who think that their job there is to call out racism wherever they see it in Parliament. It's almost, I mean, Marine Faruqi deserved to be told to go back to Pakistan. With every ounce of my breath, she deserved that. Because the way that she was speaking, she was effectively placing Pakistan over Australia. And if you can think that in any respect, outside of the cricket maybe, because there was a small stint where Pakistan was actually pretty decent at cricket. If you can say that in any respect when it comes to government and government policy, leave. You're comparing Australia with the third world. I mean, Labor's doing the same thing, right, by saying that we're winning something by being in COP31 as the president, when our comparison is Chile and Fiji, which we spoke about last episode. And so maybe it's a running trend. Maybe that's the new... Maybe Australia's decision is that we want to become a third world nation again. Everything points that way. Okay, it's hard to say it, but Indigenous rights, okay, giving Indigenous land rights back and saying that you can run your community the way that you've always wanted to run your community, as it was pre-colonization. That is a third world concept. Reducing our energy to the point where we're no longer able to actually properly keep the lights on. That's a third world concept. The idea that no one will be able to own anything and they'll just be renting space, that is a third world concept. So maybe that is the idea. We're just going to slowly regress. We're going to slowly slip into being the third world. All thanks to people like this who are excited for it. Let's get into our other topics. Unfortunately, making these sorts of little please do's is kind of essential. I enjoy doing it just for the fun of it, but at the same time, if you want to get a message out, you need the people in your community to just comment, like, subscribe, all of the normal jargon, right? Please just take a moment and give me a hand. We need to create a culture of commentary together. And I love the messages coming in my DMs. Put it in the comments section so that everyone else can see it too. Thank you. I just wanted to bring this one up quickly and then we'll get into our final segment. Now, Bega Valley. That is the valley, not the company, but the company effectively is the valley. So Bega Valley under Bega, the company that brought us Vegemite and all of those beautiful Australian products, have started a community workshop called Bega Circular Valley Community Workshops. The intention behind this is effectively to make Bega almost like its own little sovereign area when it comes to resources. So that is no waste. Everything stays within the community. Now, while we speak of stagnation, this will cause that to an extent. They're saying effectively, we're happy with where we are as a community, and we don't want to be reliant on government and, the rest of Australia in order to maintain ourselves. Now, Bega has a very rich Indigenous history. Because of how the land is, because of the way that, or the resources that it has in that area, even from Indigenous times, it was always self-sustaining. In that the people in that area were able to actually settle in a large way and utilize the resources of the valley almost year round. It has rivers, it has mountains, it has valleys. That area can sustain life. It has forests, open plains. It had almost everything that you'd need in order to live comfortably. It's like Little Eden, but it's bigger. And so the idea stems from Indigenous ideas. And I've spoken about this previously. There is a place for Indigenous ideas when it comes to good natural foods, when it comes to maintaining forests, rivers in a more natural way, and maintaining a lifestyle that is closely connected to the land instead of to the chemical-rich, fast-paced, low-nutrient, high-density living that we have today. There is a place for that in Australia. The homestead community is a really good representation of how you can blend both ideas together. Let's read from this is from CSIRO. We're learning from past experience and we're also adapting, and together the community is doing it in their own way. From those foundations, the workshop unfolded the Bega Valley Commemorative Civic Centre, filled with business owners, educators, manufacturers, artists, farmers, community groups, government representatives, high school students, scientists, more than 140 community leaders, reimagining their region not as a line of production and waste, but as a living system where resources, knowledge, and well-being can circulate continuously. Across key themes like entrepreneurship, land management, construction, education, and tourism, discussion flowed about how circularity is currently practiced in Bega Valley and how it could work even more for them in the future, and how science could play a part. The Bega Circular Valley story begins with Barry Irvine, the executive chairman of the Bega Group, the company behind Vegemite, Dairy Farmers, and Farmer Union Greek-style yogurt. A circular economy rethinks the traditional take, make, dispose model. It designs out waste and pollution by keeping materials and products in use for as long as possible while regenerating natural systems in the process. This sounds awesome. I love it. I think this could be a really cool model. A really cool model for how semi-rural or urban-ish, not metropolitan quite, living could work within Australia. We have the land to do it. We are one of the most underutilized nations when it comes to land. I mean, we could really take a leaf out of Dubai's book and start investing our dollars if we can find a way to get back to surplus, which isn't that difficult when we're so resource rich. We just have to actually ask for our own worth when it comes to coal specifically, gas specifically. Stop shortchanging ourselves and create a system that allows us to effectively say, we now have a sovereign wealth fund in which we can make all of Australia a livable place. Start building, desert cities that are fueled by incredible power and incredible human ingenuity. We have that capacity. Okay, we created Wi-Fi in this country. The phone that you're probably using right now to watch this, that is connected to the internet via an Australian creation. We can do incredible things. So I love this from the Bega community. Let's get into a controversial topic. It's going to be a little bit of fun. I'm coining a phrase. I think I haven't seen it anywhere else. And I think it's something that especially the conservative, right-wing, and probably even the independent libertarians ought to start using. We've got to start combating the shutdown language of the left. Let's get into it. Effectively, for the last 2 years since the kickoff of the Israeli-Palestine war, the world has been flooded with the term Islamophobia. Now, Islamophobia, when decontracted, effectively means the irrational fear of Islam. Now, in the wake of the peace deal, or at least the path to peace deal that came out effectively 7 weeks ago now, we watched some of the most horrific scenes that we've seen throughout the entire conflict itself. We watched Hamas round up disloyal members of the Palestinian core, the Palestinian population, put them in the streets, put guns to the back of their heads and shoot them in cold blood. No trial, just terror. Now, over the last 24 hours, we've been greeted with a new video. Another example of why it isn't Islamophobic to call out Islam. The right wing, the religious wing, and the libertarian wing of our nations, the people who enjoy the freedom that allows them to be who they are, need to step up and start utilizing these terms in a way that shows the people who are blind, willfully, or ignorant why their thought processes are so dangerous. Islamopragmatism is a term that needs to go around the world because it is not irrational to fear Islam. The things that are done in the name of Allah are terrifying. And they are terrifying because they are so visceral. It feels like you're taking a lens into the past and you are saying, I'm watching history happen in front of my screen. Now, you can say all you want about the atrocities that have been committed by Catholics and Christians throughout all of human history. They at least were a product of their time. There was no one better at that time. There was no one doing things better. At the time of colonialism, okay, Indigenous populations in Australia were cannibalizing themselves, doing child sacrifice. They were a worse peoples when it came to human rights than the British. Yes, when the British came, they did some atrocious things to the Indigenous populations here. We agree. Child sacrifice was the norm for American Indians in order to bring rainfall when the British landed in America. Yes, we agree. Slavery was bad. But when you compare the transatlantic slave trade to the Barbary slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade looks like trading kittens. Completely different world. Africa to this day still has slavery. Asia to this day still has slavery. The Middle East to this day still has slavery. The only nations on earth that got rid of slavery were the colonized Christian nations, the only ones that got rid of slavery outright. And so when you take a lens into the past 800-900 years and you watch it on your screens happening today, you start to wonder, is it Islamophobic or is it Islamopragmatism? I have a natural pessimism to the idea of Islam becoming powerful in the Western nations, and this is why.
Afghanistan's Taliban authorities carried out the public execution of a man on Tuesday convicted of killing 13 members of a family, including 9 children, earlier this year. Tens of thousands of people attended the execution at a sports stadium in the eastern city of Khost. The man was shot to death by a relative of those he was convicted of having killed, according to Khost police. The victims' families were offered reconciliation that would have spared the man, but they chose the death penalty, according to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said this was the 11th public execution since the Taliban seized power in 2021. The UN has strongly criticized the Taliban for public executions, and its Afghanistan rapporteur had urged for it to be stopped. Afghanistan's Taliban authorities have imposed a strict interpretation of Sharia law, which has included a return of public executions.
And just for context, we'll take a look at how many people were actually there. We'll take a look at the 80,000 people who were watching and praising the public execution by a 13-year-old boy.
What is it though? What is it though? Slap away with stone.
Said this before and I'll say it again. When Islamism becomes a majority inside of a nation, that majority being 30, 40%, the correct word is plurality. Freedom out the window, replaced with persecution. Morality out the window, replaced with Sharia. And here's the funny thing, right? Because a lot of people think that the majority of people who are right-wing are Christian religious. Okay, we are Christian, Catholic, Orthodox, Jewish. We are religious. And what a lot of people do not understand is that if Islam was to come here and become a majority, from a moral standpoint when it comes to abortion, when it comes to IVF, when it comes to criminal justice, etc., we are probably more aligned with Islamists than the majority of the left-wing people who are claiming to be all in favor of ensuring that we give social liberty to these people. The issue is this: when you cannot provide evidence for where your ideology has worked successfully and peacefully, then you force us to be pragmatic about allowing you into this nation. Now, a lot of people try and tout Indonesia. Indonesia is in no way, shape, or form a good, safe, or fair country. Indonesia was not forced to take Islam. Not really. There were initial conflicts and initial scuffles, I guess you'd say, between local populations and the migrating Muslims. However, what did happen is, once the majority of people became Islamic, they effectively tried to take over the rest of Southeast Asia. And to a large extent, they succeeded until they were pushed out by Japan and the Chinese. And so pragmatism, Islamopragmatism, is now a standard for Western countries and has to be. There are good Muslims. There are good Muslims. And I've said this before, and it caused a lot of stir up in some of the people who listen. But if you're the kind of Muslim who comes here and is willing to have a beer, then turn up. I know you're not a radical. Okay, if you're the kind of Muslim who will sit down and have a beer, I know you're not a radical. And that's the stuff that worries us. That's the stuff that makes us pessimistic about Islam. It's the people who pretend as though they are peaceful, but in actual fact, they are wolves in sheep's clothing. And it's a terrifying element of Islam. It's not the first time. In fact, every other time that has ever happened, we have seen the fear turn into a reality. I hope it doesn't happen. And if people like Pauline Hanson stay as stalwarts for this issue, then potentially it won't. Allow time for the people who are here and for the children of the people who come here to realize that that lifestyle and that way of thinking is not congruent with the Australian nation. Allow them time to assimilate. If it's not the first generation and it's not the second, then the third will be closer and the fourth will be closer again. That'll do us for the show today. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe on the YouTube, like everything and comment on everything if you do not mind. That really helps out. I am trying to line up some other interviews. I've got a potential one with Abolish Abortion Australia that I'm trying to put together. I want to do it in person though, so I'm trying to find a decent space or maybe remodel some of this to allow for that. But yep, that's it. My name is Mark Perotta, and this is the Mark Perotta Show. God bless.